She rejected him because he looked poor, then she learned who he really was. The moment she saw him standing outside the elegant restaurant, she decided he was not the kind of man she wanted in her life. His faded shirt, inexpensive shoes, and old wristwatch told her everything she thought she needed to know. She had no idea that the man she was about to reject had spent years quietly building something far more valuable than money. The strangest part was that he didn't argue with her. He didn't become angry. He simply lowered his eyes, smiled sadly, and walked away while the woman he had hoped to know better watched him disappear into the bright afternoon crowd. If you believe in kindness, second chances, and never judging someone by appearances, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this message, and subscribe to Kindness Corner 2.0. Sometimes the person we overlook today can become the person we wish we had understood yesterday. The story began on a clear Saturday afternoon in the busy city of Billionaire, where expensive cars lined the streets and fashionable restaurants filled with people celebrating their success. Among them was 29-year-old Ilara Whitmore, the daughter of a wealthy real estate developer. Ilara had grown up surrounded by luxury. She wore designer clothes, attended exclusive events, and had been taught from childhood that reputation and appearance mattered. That afternoon, her best friend had arranged a meeting between Ilara and a man named Cashin Vale. Cashin was 31 and worked in what appeared to be an ordinary maintenance company. He arrived at the restaurant wearing a simple navy shirt, dark trousers, and slightly worn brown shoes. His black hair was neatly combed, and his expression was calm and respectful. Ilara looked at him from across the table and immediately felt disappointed. She had expected someone polished, confident, and obviously successful. Instead, Cashin looked like a hard-working man who had taken the bus across town to meet her. Their conversation lasted only a few minutes before Ilara began asking questions about his career. Cashin answered honestly. He told her he worked with a company that handled building maintenance, community housing projects, and property repairs. He didn't mention that he owned the company. He didn't mention that the company had grown from a tiny repair service into one of the largest privately owned property maintenance firms in the region. And he certainly didn't mention that much of his wealth had been quietly invested into affordable housing for families who couldn't afford expensive apartments. Ilara heard only what she wanted to hear. She looked at his inexpensive watch and then at his worn shoes. Her expression changed. She politely ended the meeting, explaining that she didn't think they were suitable for each other. Cashin understood exactly what she meant. He stood, thanked her for meeting him, and left without embarrassing her or himself. Outside, the afternoon sunlight fell across the sidewalk as Cashin walked toward the parking area. A dusty old sedan was waiting there, but it wasn't actually his car. He had chosen to arrive that way because he didn't want anyone to know about his wealth. For years, Cashin had deliberately avoided displaying his money. His father had once been a successful businessman who lost everything after trusting the wrong people. When Cashin was 19, his family had nearly lost their home. Cashin watched his parents struggle, and that experience changed him forever. He promised himself that if he ever became wealthy, he would never allow money to become the measure of a person's worth. He started his first repair business with borrowed tools and a bicycle. He fixed leaking pipes, broken doors, damaged roofs, and electrical problems for people who couldn't afford large contractors. His reputation grew because he never turned away an elderly person or struggling family simply because they couldn't pay much. Years later, his small business became a major company. Yet Cashin remained the same. He still visited community projects himself. He still wore simple clothes. He still kept the old wristwatch his father had given him when he was 21. Meanwhile, Ilara returned home convinced that she had made the right decision. That evening, her father, Montgomery Whitmore, called her into his study. He had received an invitation to a major charity event taking place the following week. The event was being organized to announce a new affordable housing initiative. Ilara barely paid attention until her father mentioned the person funding the project. Cashin Vale. Ilara froze. She remembered the man from the restaurant. Her father continued talking, explaining that Cashin had quietly purchased several abandoned properties and planned to transform them into safe, affordable homes for working families. He was also funding a scholarship program for young people who wanted to study engineering and construction. Elara stared at her father. The same man she had dismissed because he looked poor was apparently one of the most respected young entrepreneurs in the city. But what surprised her even more was what happened next. Her father showed her a photograph from a business magazine. Cashin was standing beside a group of construction workers, wearing the same simple navy shirt she had seen that afternoon. There was no expensive suit. No flashy jewelry. No luxury car. Just the same quiet man. Elara felt a painful wave of embarrassment. She realized she hadn't rejected Cashin because she knew him. She had rejected an image she had created in her mind. The following week, Elara attended the charity event with her father. The venue was filled with business leaders, journalists, community representatives, and families who had benefited from Cashin's projects. Then Cashin walked onto the stage. He wasn't wearing an extravagant outfit. He wore a simple charcoal suit and the same old watch. The crowd applauded. Cashin thanked everyone who had supported the housing project, but he didn't speak about his own success. Instead, he spoke about the families who had spent years moving from one temporary home to another. He spoke about children trying to study in crowded apartments. He spoke about elderly people choosing between rent and medicine. Then he said something that stayed with Elara. He explained that success meant very little if it only improved your own life. Elara stood silently in the audience. For the first time, she understood why he had never mentioned his wealth. After the presentation, she waited until Cashin stepped away from the crowd. She approached him carefully. She apologized for the way she had treated him. Cashin listened. He didn't insult her. He didn't remind her that she had been wrong. He simply told her that everyone makes mistakes and that what mattered was what they learned from them. But Elara wasn't asking him to forget what happened. She wanted to understand him. Over the next several weeks, she began volunteering at one of Cashin's housing projects. She met families who knew him not as a wealthy businessman but as the person who had personally helped them find a safe place to live. She met an elderly carpenter whose medical bills Cashin had quietly paid. She met a young student whose engineering scholarship had changed the direction of his life. She met a mother who had once slept in a cramped apartment with her children and now had a clean, safe home. And slowly, Elara began to understand that Cashin's greatest achievement wasn't the money he had earned. It was the lives he had improved without expecting recognition. One afternoon, Elara found Cashin repairing a broken bench outside a community center. She smiled and asked why he didn't simply hire someone to fix it. Cashin laughed softly and explained that sometimes people trusted you more when they saw that you were willing to work beside them. Elara looked at his old watch. She finally understood why he still wore it. It wasn't a symbol of poverty. It was a reminder of where he had come from. Cashin had once owned almost nothing. His father had given him that watch during the hardest period of his life and told him that character was the one thing nobody could take away. Cashin had never forgotten those words. Months passed, and Elara changed in ways even her family noticed. She stopped judging people by their clothes. She began spending weekends volunteering. She started helping with community fundraising projects and eventually launched a small program to provide school supplies to children from struggling families. Her father was proud. But Cashin remained cautious. He knew that people could change temporarily because of guilt, admiration, or excitement. He wanted to see whether Elara's transformation was real. It was. One bright afternoon, they stood outside a newly completed housing complex. Families were moving into their apartments while children ran through the clean courtyard. Elara looked at Cashin and told him something she had never admitted before. She said that on the day they first met, she had believed a person's clothes could reveal their value. Now she understood that clothes could show what someone owned, but never what someone carried inside their heart. Cashin smiled. He didn't promise her a perfect future. He simply told her that genuine respect was more important than first impressions, and that trust was something built slowly through actions. Elara agreed. From that day forward, their relationship grew not from wealth, status, or appearances, but from friendship, respect, and shared kindness. Years later, people who knew their story often asked how Elara could have failed to recognize Cashin's success when they first met. She always gave the same answer. She hadn't failed to recognize a wealthy man. She had failed to recognize a good man. And that lesson changed her life forever. The world often teaches people to look at expensive clothes, impressive cars, beautiful houses, and powerful names. But some of the richest hearts belong to people who don't advertise what they have. Sometimes the person wearing an old watch has more wisdom than the person wearing a diamond. Sometimes the quiet worker has built more lives than the person standing on a stage receiving applause. Cashin never needed to prove his worth. His actions had already done that. And Elara's greatest second chance wasn't simply getting to know Cashin better. It was getting the opportunity to become a better version of herself. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes people should be judged by their character rather than their appearance, and subscribe to Kindness Corner 2.0 for more emotional stories about kindness, courage, and second chances. Before the ending, I have one special request. Comment, "I choose kindness," if you believe a person's heart matters more than their appearance. Because sometimes, the person we overlook isn't poor at all. Sometimes, they are simply rich in the things money can never buy: humility, compassion, loyalty, and a heart willing to help others. And sometimes, the greatest lesson life gives us begins with one simple mistake: judging someone before taking the time to know who they really are. The end.